Tano was a riskless, ugly sock addict who had zero chance of clapping real cheeks, since girls thought he looked like Rafiki. However, his chances went up when he befriended the school's most popular shy girl who secretly has a loser kink. When he first met her, she was standing next to her locker, so he tried to strike up a conversation with her. But she surprised him by responding with a death glare, after which she walked away immediately, leaving him to wonder if it was his putrid egg breath that scared her away. Since he had no idea who she was, he looked at the name in her locker and learned that her name was Comey. When he got to class a few minutes later, he was surprised to find her seated next to him. Even though he was still traumatized by their earlier encounter, he was secretly glad he got to sit next to the prettiest girl in the class. However, he could sense the undisguised hostility his fellow classmates had towards him. This was because they saw him as a worthless nitwit undeserving of the seat next to Comey, who they considered a goddess. The homeroom teacher soon walked into the classroom and asked them to introduce themselves one by one. The first girl who spoke shook so much you'd think she was a busted-up washing machine, which made the class laugh. When it was Comey's turn, everyone focused on her, so she walked up to the board and wrote her name on it boldly. For reasons best known to them, the class began cheering as though she were some kind of celebrity. Comey still said nothing as she returned to her seat to allow someone else to take over. Tano happened to be that unfortunate soul, and his introduction was received with so much hate, solidifying the fact that he was the most hated person in the entire class. As soon as class was over, Tano tried to mingle with his classmates, but got caught in a stampede and was knocked out when everyone tried to speak with Comey. When he woke up later, only Comey was in class, but when she noticed he was awake and had heard her baby talking to her plushie, she tried to make a run for it. Tano realized she was feeling embarrassed, so he tried to stop her from running out of the class. Comey didn't stop until she heard him ask if she had a hard time speaking to people. However, Tano assumed she was angry with him. He began shaking like a leaf and attempted to explain himself, but Comey surprised him by trying to speak. However, she couldn't, so they both worked together to arrange the classroom. As they did that, Tano asked her a question, but as expected, she began stuttering like her brain had a 2-megabyte processor. Tano looked around the classroom, hoping there was something there he could use to speak with her. When he noticed the chalkboard, he asked her to write down the things she wanted to say. Comey did so and explained that she always got nervous whenever she tried to speak to someone. She told him she wished she could make friends like everyone else did, but since she could never get the words out, she was always alone. She also apologized for unintentionally causing him problems on the first day, after which she wiped the board and tried to leave. To her surprise, Tano began writing on the board, and the both of them began having a conversation that way. While they conversed, Tano asked Comey what her dream was, and she told him she wanted to have 100 friends. Tano promised to help her get 99 more friends, since he considered himself to be her friend already. By the next day, Tano had already thought of a way to help Comey achieve her dreams, and he felt confident that it would work like a charm. Unfortunately, when he approached a group of girls and attempted to speak to a girl named Yami, he discovered the true meaning behind the song Sweet But Psycho. Yami smiled politely at him before speaking into his ear with so much malice that he apologized for even calling her name. After that, Yami returned to her friends acting like she didn't just make Tano question his miserable existence. Tano returned to his seat after a few more failed attempts to talk to others, made him realize they all hated him. However, he wasn't prepared to give up, so he decided to speak to the one person he'd wanted to avoid, Najimi. Najimi was a social butterfly and happened to be friends with almost everyone at school, because for some reason they were all her childhood friends. This was why he was surprised when he asked if she would be friends with Comey, and she said no, so he took her outside to speak with her. Najimi explained that Comey was the one person she couldn't be friends with because she didn't understand her. She told him that she'd been in the same class with Comey when they were younger, but when she tried to befriend her, Comey refused to speak with her. She said the rejection made her sick for a week, and since then she did her best to avoid Comey like she was the Black Plague itself. Tano defended Comey, saying it was all a misunderstanding, and suggested Najimi walk home with her to prove his point, but she refused. When he insisted, she teased him, saying he was desperately trying to help Comey because he wanted to spread her legs like his favorite book. Tano assured her that he only had pure intentions, so Najimi agreed to walk home with Comey. Later that day after school, Najimi and Comey walked home together, while Tano followed them like a stalker. Unfortunately, things weren't going well as Najimi tried to make small talk with Comey and got no response at all. Just when Tano decided to text Najimi, the girls were two record-breaking ugly delinquents. Tano became worried that they would hurt his friends, but when he saw Najimi speaking to them like old friends, he calmed down. It turned out that the Mikey ripoff who had more cholesterol than blood had a crush on Najimi. He had tracked her down just so he could ask her to date him, but Najimi told him to try getting a gym membership before he attempted to bag a girl. This angered him, so he took off his shirt, grabbed her wrist, and tried to force her to accept his feelings. The next moment, Comey tapped him on the shoulder and tried to return his house key, which had fallen from his pocket to him. When she tried to speak up about the key, the dumb idiot assumed she was threatening to murder him with it, because he heard her say the word die. Scared for his life, he took off running and his friend went after him like the fool that he was. When they were gone, Comey looked depressed, so Tano tried to assure her that she'd done nothing wrong. Just then, Najimi interrupted him and told Comey she would be friends with her before she burst into laughter. Comey didn't say anything, but it was pretty clear to Tano that she was happy, and he was very proud of her. The following day during lunch, Najimi sat with Comey and talked so much about anything and everything that it almost overloaded the poor girl's brain circuits. Tano had to step in and explain that Comey was antisocial, but wanted to make 100 friends even though she didn't know how to talk to people. Najimi found the revelation intriguing, so she cooked up a scheme to help Comey overcome her fear. She asked Comey to head to the coffee shop and get her a personalized coffee order, which Tano thought was absurd. He accused Najimi of toying with Comey, but she told him she was trying to help Comey. He then insisted they follow her, but she said she had 3 more lunch appointments she couldn't miss. Tano followed Comey to the shop and watched her pace outside for a while before she got the courage to go in finally. At the counter, the barista asked what she wanted to order, but when she said nothing, he showed her the menu. Comey looked at it and panicked when she didn't see Najimi's order, not realizing she could pick out the ingredients herself. The barista, on the other hand, took it upon himself to guess what drink Comey wanted. He whipped up a drink and handed it to her, and even though Comey knew it was the wrong order, she took it back to school. When she handed it over to Najimi, she told her it was the wrong order and Comey began sulking. For some reason, Tano joined Najimi to grovel and beg Comey for forgiveness, which didn't work. A few days later during lunch break, Agui, another one of Comey's classmates, noticed her watching her like a creep in the library. She couldn't understand why someone as popular as Comey was spending her lunch break watching her. Feeling overwhelmed, she went to hide out in the toilet, the one place she always felt safe, but she sensed Comey had followed her. Eventually, Comey left, so Agui came out of the stall and tried to leave as well, but on her way out, she ran into their teacher. The one asked her to tell her classmates to go to the gym during the 6th period, which freaked her out. Agui wasn't the type of person who did well in public settings, and the thought of addressing the class just added to her anxiety. However, when she sensed Comey was still watching her from the shadows, she agreed and rushed back to class to deliver the message. Upon getting to class, she got a little pep talk from her spirit guide and felt more confident. However, the moment she opened her mouth to speak, the words that came out made no sense, and everyone turned to look at her like she'd grown another head. Agui decided to make a run for it, but the moment she turned to her left, she screamed in fear and at the end made the announcement before running off. While everyone wondered what happened, Tano noticed Comey standing next to the door and concluded she had something to do with it. It turned out that earlier that day, Najimi had told Tano and Comey that it would be impossible for Comey to befriend everyone. She pulled out a stack of papers containing the profiles of those she'd carefully selected for Comey to speak with. The first person on that list happened to be Agui, who acted like she was afraid of her shadow. All the attributes Agui had that Najimi listed made Comey feel a sort of connection to her. So the moment Agui left for the library, Comey followed her. Back in the present, Comey explained everything to Tano in writing, and he felt bad that she hadn't been able to speak to Agui. Just then, Agui approached them and asked Comey if she wanted to speak with her, since she'd been following her around the whole day. She also thanked Comey for helping her speak to the class earlier, even though she'd nearly scared the living daylights out of her. Tano saw this as the perfect moment to speak up, so he suggested that the two girls become friends. To his surprise, Agui crawled up the steps as she repeatedly said no to his suggestion until she got to the top. Tano was too stunned to speak, but Agui cleared things up by saying she was unworthy of befriending Comey. She said she'd rather be her dog because that was more fitting, so Comey and Tano agreed to the weird situation. The next day, Comey showed Tano her new cell phone and told him she wanted to get her friends' phone numbers. He offered to go with her to speak with Najimi and Agui, but Comey told him she wanted to handle it by herself. He watched as she approached Najimi, who was so scared to talk to Comey with Tano being present. But in the end, Comey managed to understand what she wanted. Comey then went to Agui, who decided to act like a freak by asking Comey if she wanted pictures of her while panting like a dog. After leaving Agui, Comey went to meet Tano, who congratulated her on getting Najimi's number without his help, Instead of saying anything, Comey tried to give him her phone, but they were interrupted by Agui. She apologized for her inappropriate behavior earlier and gave Comey a piece of paper with her phone number written on it. She also let it slip that Najmi had told her that Comey wanted Tadano's number to be the first number she put on her phone. Her revelation made things between Tadano and Comey so awkward that Tadano didn't look Comey in the eyes while he put his number in her phone. Later that day, the homeroom teacher announced that the position of class president was open and asked the students to volunteer. No one seemed interested, so she asked them to nominate a candidate for the position. Immediately, the class picked Comey, who couldn't oppose them because of how scared she was to speak up. Tadano knew the situation wasn't something Comey could handle, so he decided to volunteer himself as a tribute for the Hunger Games. Sorry, the position of class president. However, Najmi beat him to the punch as she raised her hand and said she opposed the idea of Comey being president. Tadano looked at her with so much admiration and fear, because he believed she would be attacked by their classmates. However, Najmi reminded him that she was a lack of nutjob when she declared that Comey deserved a position higher than the class president. She said a person of Comey's caliber deserved to be given a better position and suggested she take on the role of class goddess. Seeing as everyone else in the class besides Tadano was secretly a delusional cuckoo, they all agreed and even cheered Najmi on. When they all settled down, the teacher asked who the class president would be, and they chose Tadano. Not because they thought he was capable, but because they regarded him a useless waste of space whose only purpose was to serve Comey and worship her. That night, Comey was checking her phone contacts and practicing how to make a phone call when she accidentally dialed Tadano's number. She immediately cut the call as she began to panic, but he called her right back. Comey answered the call and was able to explain that she dialed his number by accident before she hung up. Tadano was both shocked and mesmerized that he'd heard Comey's voice for the first time, and admitted he liked it. The following day at school, Najmi was playing games with Yami and some other students. Tadano noticed Comey wanted to join them, so he spoke loudly to draw Najmi's attention, and it worked. She called out to Comey and invited her to play with them, which made the other students very excited. Tano became worried that Najmi would use the situation as another teaching moment for Comey, so he asked if he could join. Compared to the warm and happy welcome Comey received, Tadano could sense their hatred towards him. However, they accepted him because they didn't want Comey to know they detested him and began playing again. During the game, Najmi announced that the loser would make kissy faces, and everyone did their best to win just so they could see Comey make a kissy face. Tadano noticed this and made sure he lost the game just as the bell rang signaling the start of class. After everyone left, Najmi returned to tell Tadano that he still had to make a kissy face. Tadano felt depressed, but Comey thanked him for helping her join the game, which made him feel a little better. Some days later, while they did their physical exams, a girl named Tano made it her mission to beat Comey at all costs. Tadano noticed her watching Comey like Pennywise watching his next meal from the sewer, and he was surprised to say the least. Since she was the first and only person who didn't look at Comey like she was the reincarnation of Aphrodite. He had no idea she was in a secret contest with the oblivious Comey, and was very upset when she lost the said contest. The next day, Comey was on her way to school and had no idea that Yami was following her very closely like an obsessed stalker. The crazy psycho even went as far as sniffing, licking and bagging a strand of Comey's hair that she found. It was very clear that even a restraining order wouldn't be enough to keep the Joker wannabe away from Comey. Just as she attempted to speak to Comey, Agui, aka Comey's ever-faithful dog, approached Comey and began speaking to her. Yami looked at her with so much hate that when the poor girl turned to look at her, all she saw staring back at her was the face of a hideous Oni. Agui screamed in fear and ran away, giving Yami the chance to once again try to speak to Comey after she cursed Agui out. Unfortunately, Najmi beat her to it and began speaking with Comey, which made her so mad, but she pretended everything was fine when Najmi noticed her. However, she didn't miss the chance to throw a subtle insult at her before she was finally able to speak with Comey. In the usual Comey manner, she stared at Yami, who misinterpreted it and assumed Comey considered her to be a low-born scum unworthy of her acknowledgement. Najmi tried to explain things to her, but the loony screwball seemed to love being ignored by someone like Comey. When Najmi tried to get her attention, she ushered her into a quiet hallway and demanded to know what her relationship with Comey was. Najmi was surprised by her sudden personality change and assured her that she and Comey were just friends. Yami accepted this but told her that she had to make sure she introduced her to Comey properly, which she did. Once again, Comey only stared at Yami, which seemed to fuel her obsession with Comey even more, to the point where she had to physically stop herself from going berserk. She then took Tadano's seat and offered to give her some of her lunch since she'd made too much that morning. Comey didn't like the fact that she was sitting at Tadano's desk, but she'd imagined he was there encouraging her to make friends and agreed to take Yami's lunch. Yami let out a victorious roar and apologized for startling them before she returned to her seat. The next moment, the bell rang and Najimi finally noticed Tadano was MIA. For the first time since they walked into class, while she was trying to figure out how to make it through the day without Tadano to interpret Comey's actions, Tadano woke up in a room filled with pictures of Comey. After looking around some more, he realized he'd been kidnapped by Yami since there were pictures of her in the room as well. During the break at school, Najimi asked Yami if she could go over to her place after school. Yami, who for some reason was sitting at Tadano's desk again, tried to refuse until Najimi told her she would bring Comey along. This made Yami imagine Comey lying on her bed and leaving her scent on her sheets, so she immediately agreed. However, she remembered the fact that her room was practically a shrine dedicated to Comey, and that Tadano was her prisoner, so she'd freaked out a little. After school, when Yami got home with Najimi and Comey, she asked them to wait outside, claiming that she needed to tidy up her room first. When she walked in, she took down the pictures and put Tadano in her closet. She also threatened to bury him in the mountains, where no one would find him if he made it sound. After she shut the door, he heard Najimi's voice and began moving about to get her attention, but Yamini quickly covered it up, saying her neighbors were very noisy. She promised the girls that they had nothing to worry about, then offered to go bring some drinks. Before leaving, she warned them not to go snooping around in her closet with a very menacing glare. However, Najimi was one nosy brat, so she opened the closet and was surprised to see Tadano all tied up in a chair. Just then, Yami returned, and when she discovered her secret had been exposed, she pulled out a pair of sharp chopsticks. Like every other deranged psychopath, she began talking about how she'd taken him because of Comey. She said she wanted to get closer to Comey, but Tadano was always getting in the way. She also said she couldn't understand why Comey spent so much time with an insignificant fool like Tadano. She told Comey that she was better off being friends with someone like her than the class reject. At that point, she was acting like the last screw keeping her sane fell off, and she was out for blood. Comey simply ignored her and set Tadano free with Najimi's help before she told Yami that her behavior was very disturbing. When she tried to walk out with Tadano, Yami begged her to stay, so Comey wrote on her notepad that she was the only person who could choose her friends. After Comey and Tadano left, Yami crumbled to the floor in despair over the fact that Comey had chosen Tadano over her. The next day at school, Comey apologized to Tadano for the ordeal he had gone through at the hands of Yami. She blamed herself for it and asked if he still wanted to be friends with her. Tadano told her it wasn't her fault and told her that he'd keep being friends with her because he wanted to. Just then, Najimi arrived with Yami, who apologized to Tadano for trying to get rid of him, even though she didn't mean it. She also apologized to Comey, and when she didn't respond, she seemed more than happy to be ignored. Tadano and Najimi had to explain Comey's situation to her so she wouldn't keep misinterpreting her actions. However, Yami seemed to think it was a cute side of Comey, and when Comey agreed to be friends with her, she was beyond happy. A few days later, Hidano once again engaged in a secret contest with Comey without her being aware of it, and this time she was determined to win. The class was doing their physical aptitude exams, and she lost every single event, which made her sad. However, she wasn't ready to give up, as there was one more category left, which was racing. Unfortunately for Hidano, her hopes to participate in the Olympics were dashed when Comey zoomed past her on the track. Hidano had no choice but to accept her defeat, and she went to congratulate a clueless Comey on her victory, which only made her confused. When she tried to shake her hand, Comey didn't respond, and that made Hidano delude herself into believing that Comey wanted to continue their rivalry. After school, Najimi asked Comey if she and Tadano could come over to her house, making her a bit conflicted. Eventually, she gave her nod of approval, and they all went to Comey's house, where they met her mother, who welcomed them. When they got to Comey's room, Kajimi made herself at home by sitting on her bed while Tadano and Comey took the floor. Comey's mother soon came in with some tea and snacks, but Kajimi excused herself to go to the toilet. However, that was all an act, as she crouched down outside the door so she could watch Comey and Tadano. She hoped that leaving them alone would help Tadano make a move on Comey. However, she was wrong. 15 minutes later, she returned to the room and told them that they were like an old married couple. She then began looking around the room, hoping to find something Comey kept hidden, and eventually, she found Comey's collection of books on how to talk to people. Since it wasn't that amusing, she picked up Comey's photo album and began looking through it. By the time they were done, it was already dark out, so they said their goodbyes to Comey and left. The next day at school, Comey told Tano and Najimi that she wanted to go to a ramen shop since it was one of her dreams. Agui overheard them talking about it, so after school, she took them to the best ramen shop in town. When they got in, they'd all placed their order, and as usual, Najimi began asking a million questions until Agui told her it was against the rules to speak. The rules were simple. Don't talk, make your order quickly after taking your seat, respond to the owner's questions about what topping you desire. After that, eat your ramen, return your bowl, and vacate your seat so another patron can use it. Comey was the first to finish eating and people were amazed by her poise and good manners. Tano and Kijimi forgot to eat because they were busy watching Comey eat, so they ended up eating soggy noodles. After leaving the shop, Comey thanked them for bringing her and suggested they come there again some other time. Some days later, Najimi was talking Comey's ears off with one of her unnecessary stories when a girl wearing an eye patch approached them. She put on a one-man show about the so-called dragon power residing inside her and asked Comey to form a blood pact with her to surprise it. Najimi recognized her as Nakanaka and knew she was a Chuabu, or in other words a person who has deluded themselves into believing they were something they weren't. When Comey asked Nakanaka to explain more about the dragon's power, Nakanaka began shaking and stuttering like an idiot. To hide the fact that she had no idea what she was talking about, she excused herself saying her eye injury was acting up. After she left, Najimi said she reminded her of the time Tano was a Chuabu. Comey asked what she meant, so she told her about Tadano's Chuabu phase in middle school and how he acted like he was the main character in a shonen manga. During that time, he had a crush on the school's Madonna, so he enlisted Najimi's help to woo her. The plan had been simple. Write the word love on the field where she could see it, then take her to the back of the school to clap her cheeks.
Yeah, boy.
Sori confessed to her. However, before he could get the words out, she turned him down saying she wasn't interested in dating a lame-ass Chuabu. It was her rejection that made Tano decide to change his ways and become normal. Later on, they went to the gym for gym class, and a teacher asked them to pair up for their warm-up exercise. As expected, everyone wanted to be Comey's partner in Nakanaka, who realized she had no hope whatsoever, didn't bother trying. Instead, she began gaslighting herself into believing she didn't need a partner until Comey approached her. They worked on the stretches together, and when they were done, Comey turned to leave. Nakanaka called out to her and tried to thank her, but she was too embarrassed to get the words out, so she began spewing a whole lot of hot crap. Comey just listened to her, as she talked about them forming a blood pact, and how Comey was now her slave, which was also her way of saying Comey was her friend. Days later, Najimi told Comey they were going shopping when she discovered that she'd never gone shopping for herself before. She also told Tano he had to go with them, and invited Agui, who was very pleased to go out with her master. When they got to the mall, Yami approached them, claiming she spotted them while shopping. Tano and Najimi knew the was lying, since they were well aware that she belonged on the FBI's most wanted list because of her extreme stalking abilities. Nevertheless, they allowed her to join their group, and after they discovered that Comey had no idea what kind of clothes to pick out, Najimi came up with an idea. She proposed that they all pick an outfit they believed Comey would look good in, and they vote on the best one after she tried them on. The first outfit Comey tried on was a red Chinese dress, which Najimi picked out. The second was Yami's choice, and everyone agreed it made Comey look like a desperate hag, so she was disqualified. Comey tried on Agui's choice, which looked like it had been picked from the children's section, so they gave it low scores. Finally, Tano gave Comey the clothes he picked out, and the moment she stepped out of the changing room, everyone agreed that was the one. Later on, Comey lay in bed reading a magazine when she decided she needed a haircut, so she went to the salon. The shop assistant saw her standing outside the shop and invited her in, but Comey didn't move a muscle until the hairstylist opened the door. It seemed she was used to Comey's antisocial behavior and already had a way to communicate with her. The shop's assistant, on the other hand, didn't know this and assumed Comey disliked her. She tried her best to make small talk with Comey while washing her hair, but it was pointless. In the end, she stopped trying, and after Comey was done with her haircut, she pointed at a magazine and paid her bill. After she left, the assistant asked the stylist if Comey disliked her, and the woman explained that Comey had a hard time talking to others. The following week at school, Najimi complained about the upcoming tests and said she was finding it hard to study. She begged Tano and Comey to accompany her to the library to study, and they did, even though Tano knew she had no interest whatsoever in studying. When they got there, Agui welcomed them, but when Najimi began speaking loudly, she got hit in the head with a fan by a girl who looked like a human-gorilla hybrid. Agui told them her name was Garimi, and she was in charge of making sure the library was quiet at all times, so she advised them not to make noise. She said if Gurimi hit them with her fan 3 times, they would be kicked out of the library. Despite the warning, Najini couldn't keep her mouth shut and got smacked 2 more times before Gurimi took her out. At the end of the day, Comey and Tano also left the library to be with their friend. When the test results eventually came out, Najini passed, making Tano realize she was just a lazy beast when it came to studying. Finally, the summer holiday began and Comey was feeling restless after spending the first week indoors doing her assignments. She thought about calling her friends to invite them out, but she was a bit scared and gave up. Tano also happened to be in the same position as she was, and he thought giving her a call would be too intimate. While he was considering his choices, his phone rang out loud and almost scared him to death. At the same time, Comey tried calling him, but when he didn't pick up, she decided to drop her phone. However, Najini called her up almost immediately and invited her to go to the pool the next day with her and Tano. The next day, Comey met Najimi and Tano outside the pool building, and before they went in, Agui joined them. Coincidentally, Yami and her friends also happened to be there, and as expected, she made sure they let her join them. When they went to change clothes, Yami kept watching Comey like a creep while she reminisced about the entire week she spent watching her house. As soon as she noticed Comey pulling out her swimsuit, she became super charged up. However, the idea of Comey walking around looking adorable in her school swimsuit didn't sit right with her. That was why she grabbed Comey and insisted they go get another swimsuit at the shop. Later on, as the girls came out one by one in their swimsuits, the boys except Tano rated them a 10. However, they gave Comey 100 million points. The first place they went to was the water slide, and Najini asked Agui to slide down with her. The others decided to have a rock, paper, and scissors challenge to pick who got to slide down with Comey. Unfortunately for them, the slide attendant asked Tano to join Comey. Comey enjoyed the slide so much that she went on it 4 more times before they decided to go swimming in the big pool. While they were there, Najini suggested a breath-holding contest and said the winner would get a drink from the losers. Everyone agreed, and when Tano opened his eyes underwater, he noticed Najimi had a mask on. However, as soon as they noticed Comey struggling, they all gave up, and she was declared the winner of the contest. After Comey was given all the drinks, Tano sat with her as she drank one of them before Najimi approached them. She wasn't able to say what she came for because she got distracted by someone jumping off the diving board and began running towards it. Comey tried to follow her but accidentally tripped and hurt herself, so they took her to the clinic to get treated. When she came out, her friends decided to call it a day and return home, but she told them to enjoy their remaining time at the pool. Tano and Yami tried to hang around her, but Najimi dragged them away and told them that staying with Comey would only make her feel bad. Comey spent the rest of the day sitting beside the belongings and watching her friends have fun. Tano soon joined her and told her not to worry about them, because Najimi and Agui were splashing around in the pool while Yami and the others were trying to file down the spot where she fell. Comey explained that she felt bad for ruining the day, and he assured her that she hadn't done so before he splashed some pool water on her face to encourage her to make her feel better. He then stretched out his hand for her to take, but began freaking out when he realized he was holding her hand. The next moment, he was hit in the face with water just as Agui and Najimi came into view holding water guns. The others soon joined them, and they all had a water gun fight until it was time to return home that day. A few days later, Comey and her family went on a trip to visit her grandmother, aunt, uncle, and cousin Akira, who was a bit scared of Comey. However, Comey managed to make Akira comfortable, and the two began playing board games until Comey's mother asked her to go speak with her grandmother. Comey did as she was told, and her grandmother was very pleased to hear that she'd made some friends. Days later, Najini called Tano up and asked him to meet her at the summer festival. While he waited for her to arrive, Comey arrived dressed in a yukata as well, causing Tano's brain to begin glitching like an old computer RAM. His lack of words made Comey start shaking until the idiot half-wit regained his ability to speak and told her she looked nice. Comey tried to respond but discovered that she'd left her notepad at home. Najini soon arrived with a large crowd, which she said were all friends of hers she agreed to go to the festival with. Having no other choice, Tano and Comey went with them and decided to play games. Tano sucked at the shooting game, but Comey was surprisingly a pro, and she won all the games against Tano, who suddenly showed up. Najimi found them after the game and asked them to join her for a candy-cutting game, which she was very bad at. She soon excused herself, and Comey gathered the courage to tell Tano that he looked very good in his yukata. Next, they went to play a game called a 1,000-line lottery, where Najini hoped to win a £5 but ended up pulling a handkerchief. Tano gave it a try and ended up with the same prize, so Najini begged Comey to make her dream come true. The old lady in charge of the stall was very confident no one would win the grand prize because she'd rigged the ropes from the start. However, Comey surprised her by pulling the rope with the grand prize, which left her shocked and Najimi very happy. Later on, Comey and Tano sat down together, and he told her he was happy they spent some time together. A few days later, Comey went over to Tano's house, where Najimi was already waiting for her. Yami also forced her way in because she had followed Comey to his house and refused to leave when Tano tried to close the door. Inside, they met Tano's sister, Hitomi, who was surprised to see her brother had such beautiful friends. When they all settled down, Najimi revealed that she'd asked them to meet up because she hadn't done her assignments. Her friends weren't surprised by her revelation and told her they wouldn't let her copy off their assignments, which she wasn't happy about. However, they sat with her while she worked on the assignments, and when she got bored, she began talking about their holiday. The others joined her, and Comey even admitted she didn't want the holiday to be over because she enjoyed it so much. The following week, school resumed and Najimi begged, more like ordering Comey to go buy her a sandwich since she couldn't go herself. As usual, Comey agreed to go, not realizing she was being followed by a girl named Nakanaka. Nakanaka assumed Comey was a very confident city girl, unlike her, who came from the province. She followed Comey hoping to learn how to do things the way she believed girls from the city did, so she wouldn't embarrass herself. She also had no idea Tano was watching Comey and had seen her following her. Nakanaka watched as Lomi stood in front of the shop for a while before going in and walking towards the counter. However, Comey walked out again as soon as the waitress asked what she wanted to order because she was nervous. Nakanaka, on the other hand, seemed to think Comey was very cool with the way she walked out without saying anything. Eventually, Comey walked back in and pointed at a sandwich, but once the girl began asking what else she wanted and how she wanted the sandwich prepared, her head began smoking. The waitress had to handle things herself and guess the kind of sandwich Comey wanted before she packaged it. Nakanaka was so impressed and decided to order a sandwich the same way Comey did it, as she believed it was the right way. That weekend, Nakanaka invited Comey over to her house to play some video games, but soon realized Comey was a clueless noob, so she called Najimi over. Najimi came over with Tano and suggested they play a Super Mario parody game, but Comey had no idea how to play it. Nevertheless, Najimi and Nakanaka began playing while Tano took his time to teach Comey how to control the pad. During the game, Najimi was about to win, but Comey accidentally hit her with a mud ball, allowing Nakanaka to claim victory. Days later, Najimi asked Comey to help with her part-time job and hand out tissues to people on the street. Comey was overwhelmed and tried her best, but no one took a tissue from her because she didn't speak, unlike Najimi, who was doing fine. Eventually, a lady who was in desperate need of tissues walked up to her and took one. That was all it took for others to notice Comey and begin to approach her asking for tissues as well. By the end of the day, all the tissues were gone and Najimi thanked Comey for all her help, promising to pay her before walking away. The next week, the school hosted a sports festival, and that was the first time Comey met a second-year student named Netsuno. Netsuno was very athletic, and she wished Comey luck during the event, but because she touched her, Yami made their classmates swear that they would win. The first event was a stretching competition, and the person with the best stretching technique would gain 10 points for their class. The vice principal was the judge and was about to award Netsuno with the points until she saw Comey. Next was a tug-of-war game, but Comey's class lost because her classmates began fainting one after the other because of how close she was to them. For the next event, which was a mixed obstacle race, Agui came in last, but because of her magnificent bouncing plots, she was awarded extra points. She managed to tap Nakanaka's hands before she passed out so she could continue the race. Nakanaka did her best even though she was falling behind and managed to tap Tano's hand just in time. Tano continued the race as his classmates cheered him on, and just as he was about to give up, he noticed Comey cheering for him. This boosted his energy level and allowed him to tap into the Flash's speed force, so he finished third. As the games continued, it began to rain and Comey's mother arrived at that moment to cheer her daughter on. Her classmates were surprised when they saw her and even mistook her for Comey because of their striking resemblance. However, Comey felt embarrassed and tried to get her mother to leave, but the woman smiled and told her she was glad she was having fun. As soon as the rain stopped, the games continued with a treasure hunt. Comey and the others collected most of the items from Tano, but when Najimi came to ask him, he refused to give anything to her. After that, they did a bunch of other games until it was time for the final relay race. Netsuno tried to wish Comey luck with a handshake, but Comey was too nervous to reciprocate the gesture, so Netsuno retracted her hand. However, she still wished Comey luck before she got into position to collect the baton from her teammate. Both she and Comey received their batons almost at the same time, and as they ran, they were neck to neck. Unfortunately, Comey tripped in the mud and fell, causing her to fall behind. Her classmates began cheering her on until she got back up and continued the race, but Netsuno was already far ahead, so she won. At the race, everyone gathered around Comey to check if she had any injuries. Netsuno was impressed that they didn't seem to care that she hadn't won and declared they were good friends as she cried. At the end of the day, Comey was presented with a certificate for her class since they came in second. The next day, Tano was swamped with the student council workload, so Nene, one of his friends, came to lend him a hand. Comey tried to go with them, but Nene told her they could handle things on their own and left with Tano. On their way to the office, she asked if he was being bullied and he assured her that he wasn't, so she asked about his friendship with Comey. Tano told her Comey was a nice person and said that people just misunderstood her. Just then, they spotted Comey doing a very poor job of watching them, so Nene tried to talk to her after she recalled what Tano said. Comey was very nervous, so she backed away and ran off, leaving Tano to explain her actions to Nene. The next time Nene came to help Tano with his work, Comey tried to leave but changed her mind at the last minute and asked if she could help as well. The next day, she apologized to Nene for ignoring her, and Nene promised to help her with Tano. Comey was so embarrassed that she ran up the stairs, leaving Tano to ask Nene what she'd said to her. Later that day, Comey asked Tano if he could go with her to a photo booth after school because she'd heard some students talking about it. Before he could respond, Najee approached them and began telling them about the place she knew. Yami joined them and insisted on going with them. After school, they went to the booth and took some pictures that made Najee laugh when she saw them. However, Yami thought Comey looked cute and ended up with a nosebleed for some reason before Najee suggested they go eat. On the way out, Tano noticed Comey staring at some cat keychains, so the next day at school, he tried to give her one. However, Comey showed him the one she'd gotten and suggested they make a trade when he tried to take his back. Some days after that, their entire class became a battlefield as they all couldn't decide on the activity they wanted to do for the school festival. Najee proposed that they all present their ideas before the class and then vote on the best one. The only problem with that was that all the ideas centered around Comey and what each person wanted to see her dressed as or act as. There were suggestions like a maid cafe, a haunted house, a whack-a-mole game, a play with Comey as the princess, and so many others. Unfortunately, they couldn't agree on one as everyone believed their idea was the best. While the class argued, Tano approached Comey and asked what she wanted the class to do. Comey wrote down on her notepad that the maid cafe was a good idea, and almost immediately the fighting stopped as everyone agreed with her. As the days progressed, they worked together to bring life to the cafe, and Comey felt out of place because they wouldn't let her lift a finger. However, when Kaede was asked to run the store to get some more materials, she asked Comey to accompany her. Nene also volunteered to go with them because she was well aware that Kaede sometimes acted like she was on cloud 9. As if to prove her point, when they got to the store, the feather-brained girl went missing. In a state of panic, Nene suggested they split up and find her before she did something foolish. After looking around for a bit, Comey found her, and Kaede apologized for wandering off without letting her know. Comey then asked why she'd invited her to go to the store with her, and Kaede told her it was because she wanted to be friends. On their way back to school, Nene said she was glad everything worked out well, and Kaede suggested they work together to make the festival successful. The next day, they went around town distributing flyers for their cafe to different stores and shops in the area. The night before the festival, Comey helped the others prepare rice balls and distributed them to their tired classmates. On the day of the festival, Comey felt uncomfortable in the maid outfit Najee gave her because it was very short, so they changed it. Different customers soon arrived, and among them was an otaku obsessed with maid cafes. He seemed to like the cafe and classified each maid into a particular group until he met Comey and assumed she was mad at him. He quickly finished his meal and decided to leave, but Comey stopped him on his way out and shakily asked him to come back again sometime. Later on, Najee forced Tano to dress up as a maid, claiming they needed more people to help out. Comey's mother and brother also visited the cafe, which made her classmates very excited as they fawned over the poor boy. Itomi came as well, and as soon as she saw her brother flaunting his Okama side, she took a picture and left. When it was break time, Comey let Tano know that she thought he looked cute in his dress. As the day progressed, the maid cafe was doing well, but Najee thought it would be a brilliant idea to get more customers by offering them juicy deals. She offered coupons and made Comey walk around to draw more people to the cafe. However, that wasn't enough for her. because she began charging money for things that weren't included on the menu, like handholding, massages, and many others that led to the homeroom teacher suspending her from the cafe, as well as returning the money collected. This made her suggest to Comey and Tano that they walk around the school to see what the other classes were doing. As they walked around, Comey was in awe and nearly got left behind because she began spinning in a circle. They continued walking around and stumbled upon a haunted house while Najini proposed they check out. Inside, Comey was very scared even though all she saw were drawings and paintings of scary things. The girl acting as a ghost became conflicted on whether or not she ought to scare Comey since she was regarded as the school goddess. However, the time she spent contemplating was enough for Comey and the others to complete the tour of the haunted house and leave. Outside, they noticed a huge crowd gathered in the yard listening to people making confessions on the roof. Comey had never experienced such before, so she asked if they could go watch and Najimi agreed. When they arrived, Yami was on the roof, and she loudly confessed her love for Comey, asking her to get married to her. Of course, Comey didn't respond, but that didn't discourage Yami one bit as she told the audience that Comey was shy. Najimi then made Comey go on the roof and asked her to promote their cafe. The crowd waited patiently for Comey to speak, but when she opened her mouth, all she could say was meow, which left them confused. But somehow, they managed to interpret it as her telling them she was a cat maid, and they screamed in joy, promising to visit their cafe. After Comey left the roof, Tano scolded Najimi for putting Comey in such a stressful situation, but she just laughed and asked Comey if she had fun. Comey gave a nod confirming that she did have fun trying to speak to the crowd. Just then, a girl approached them with two monks and informed Najimi that their homeroom teacher had signed her up for meditation. This was her punishment for trying to make money off her classmates at the maid cafe, so they picked her up and took her away as she screamed. Tano and Comey continued walking around after Najimi was taken prisoner and bumped into Nene and her friend Kaide. Together, they continued enjoying the festival until it was time for everyone to gather in the gym for the announcement of the festival result. Comey's class won the grand prize, but due to Najimi's shady dealings, they weren't given the prize. Najimi tried to make them feel better by telling them that the prize didn't matter since they all had fun, but no one went to listen to her. After the announcements, the after-party began and Tano asked Comey to dance with him when he noticed she wanted to, but was too shy to say anything. As they danced together, Najimi came to join them, and very soon, their other classmates joined them on the dance floor as well. After the party, they all went to the karaoke and Comey became very nervous because Najimi insisted everyone had to sing a song. By the time it was her turn, she was so nervous she couldn't sing. But for some reason, her classmates cheered like they were at a Beyonce concert. Tano was next, but no one paid him any attention, which made him feel bad until he noticed Comey was listening. This boosted his confidence, and he channeled his inner Bruno Mars just to make sure he didn't disappoint her. When he was done, he tried to return to his seat in shame, but Najimi pulled both him and Comey to the front and insisted they all sing together. That's all for today's video. If you like recaps like this, check out this video over here.